Well, folks, some of you may remember the video I made about sword throwing way back in 2015. And I want to revisit that and talk a bit more about the topic because it's kind of interesting. It's a weird thing. So the original video was based on a manuscript by the Italian swordmaster Fiore dei Liberi, who actually shows a defense against somebody throwing a sword or a spear for that matter, and shows how the sword is being held. Index finger over the guard, the blade is resting on the palm, basically, and he gets ready to throw it like this. I don't know what the situation is there, if some thug saw Fiore walking around like, oh, this is the so-called master, he thinks he's hot stuff. What do you think of this? You know, either way, this is something you can do reasonably quickly from a distance, so outside of measure, meaning at a range where they can't hit you with a sword. So what you can do is just flip it in your hand like this, and it doesn't really matter which fingers go around the guard in what way. You can just let it pivot around the thumb, and then however you grip it is fine. There's another picture where the guy holds it a bit differently. And of course, if you start out with both hands on the sword, it's very easy to do that, and then you don't even risk dropping it in any way. If you want to be fancy about it, you can do it this way. Whatever. So, this actually works pretty well. If I stand here and I want to throw, boom. It flies pretty well at this short distance, actually. And you can see that when throwing it, it actually starts to spin. So I think the guard actually helps stabilize it to an extent. All right, let's walk a little further back. See how this goes. Again, no problem. I think you can actually throw this pretty far. As you can probably tell, I'm talking first about the positives, the ways in which this could be used, and then I'm going to address the issues, the risk involved. So that's kind of a dirty trick with which you may be able to catch the opponent off guard when they don't expect it. So the good thing about this grip is that it makes for quite a powerful throw, which you need because this is a one-shot kind of deal. If this fails, then you're in trouble because you've just thrown away a perfectly good weapon. You could generate quite a bit of force that way. As you can see by the flex on the blade there. So that would do quite nicely. Is it as powerful as a thrust? Well, compare the throw to this. It's a little bit more force behind this because here I continue driving my body weight into the thrust. So this could be a high risk, high reward maneuver, especially if, say, you're facing a spear or some other polearm, something that has superior reach. So then you're in this problematic position where you have to get in there without being hit, which can be pretty difficult against a longer weapon. So in that case, you can just toss it. You could also just throw it and run away. That's an expensive maneuver, considering how expensive swords were. So here's the problem. The way Fiore shows the defense, he just talks about it like, so I'm just here in my guard. I don't really care. I'm going to easily defend against it. I mean, he always does that, the way he describes the techniques. It's basically, I'm the boss and you're a noob, and I will easily defeat you, whatever. But in this case, it really is pretty easy. I tried it out, and you can see it coming. The sword doesn't fly terribly fast, and really all you need to do is step to the side. In fact, you don't even really need to necessarily use your own sword, but it's an additional safety measure. So the way Fiore shows that he's on the boar's tusk guard, and he just wants to knock the blade aside. Depends a little bit on how you interpret his description. He talks about advancing with the right foot off center and then stepping sideways with the left foot. And then knocking the sword aside toward the opponent's left side. Now this kind of depends on how you interpret it. Like, to me, cutting from here, false edge cut from here, which is really what this position is primed for, to my mind, that goes toward the opponent's right side, but you can argue that you're kind of flinging the thrown sword off to his left. I don't know about the advancing steps. So to me, it sounds like basically advance offline and then sideways, which makes sense because what you really want to do is just get offline. Whether you do this step first or after, you have to do it, because if I take a step sideways, in order to square off to the opponent again, I have to adjust like this. So I can either do 1, 2, or I can do 1, 2. Doesn't really matter. I think that's what he means. You could also, if you wanted to, from here, go 1, 2. There are a number of things you can do. Basically, the principle is you need to get away from the direction of the thrust. You just need to sidestep it. And then you can deal with it by cutting into it, by raising up to guard, just deflecting it in some way. And this is really not terribly difficult. I found it easier to just dodge it altogether without actually making contact with the thrown sword. That seems the simplest and easiest, but you can also time it so that as you step, you knock the sword aside, and that's the safest option, really. And of course, it takes a moment. Even if you do it the quickest way possible, this is still a tell. It may be unexpected, but just because it's unexpected doesn't make it likely to succeed. Because the opponent is not going to stand there slack-jawed like, huh? If you see, he's throwing, you could still respond to that. So there's a quicker way to do this. And one of my sparring partners back in Prince George around the same time actually did that once in sparring. I also did it with a spear. You can, if you stand here like this, you can do that. You can, from the guard, suddenly toss it straight forward like that. And that's really quick. That's a lot harder to deal with. And I can do it with either hand. If I'm over here, I can use the right hand, like that. And at a short distance like that, it flies perfectly straight. If I'm a little further away, I can still make this work. The only problem with that is that this is way weaker than that. Because this way you can really kind of brace your fingers against the guard and just throw pretty hard. This way, you just kind of thrust it forward and open your hand, basically. And it's nowhere near as powerful. Let me try a stronger throw like this. Because you also don't want to telegraph it. You also don't want to do this number here, because then it's too obvious. So, I mean, I nailed him in the face there. That would definitely be effective. But speaking of effectiveness, here's a problem. Thrusts in general have really no stopping power. And what I mean by that is you can run him through. He's not just gonna, boom, instantly be out and just drop to the ground and stop fighting. In fact, there are a number of reports from real life duels where they ran each other through with swords and still kept struggling, and in some cases both survived. So thrusts can be extremely lethal depending on where they land, obviously, but they don't necessarily incapacitate right that. Sure, if you nail the opponent through the head, as is also shown in some of the manuals, that's more likely to just drop them. But if you hit the chest, even if you puncture a lung, or even if you pierce the heart, it's going to take at least a few seconds. And seconds in a fight are a lot. So then, if you throw your weapon away and you nail him, and he still has a sword, especially considering here's something else that the historical manuscripts also mention, is kind of, I forgot what they refer to it, but basically sort of a dying man's rage. If they have been mortally hit, get lost, and they realize it, they may just fight like absolute crazy because they don't have anything more to lose. If you know that your opponent has just basically killed you, you're already dead, you have nothing left to lose, so you might as well take him with you. So with the sword in the chest, they might be like, oh, you know, and then they collapse a while later. So you can't just do this. You have to do, like, basically either you have to throw and run and wait for them to collapse, or you need to follow it up. If you throw and then rush in for grappling. Even better, of course, if you have a sidearm. If you can throw the sword, draw your dagger, and immediately attack. To me, that seems like the most plausible, most effective way of doing it. So, if you have an RPG character and really want them to look like a total badass, you can make them throw the sword, draw a dagger, and charge in. All right, that's all I've got for now. I hope you found it interesting and entertaining. Thanks for watching. And you, Bob, need to be ended.